This subject is the corner of a palace on the outskirts of Paris. Now, I've decided to start with this tower that's closest to us and with the centre section, because that way I can go up and down referencing the section I've drawn. Now, the challenge with this first part is to get things in good enough proportion that it's going to be an accurate measuring point for the rest of the drawing. And particularly get the decorative elements, which are an important part of this, small enough. Now, I've probably drawn these pilasters, well, I won't say probably, I've drawn these pilasters a bit too wide. This is the problem with the thickness of our pen, and I'm using a 0.2mm pen here. This is the problem with the line thickness when we don't actually have a line thickness in our reference. We have an edge, and on a relatively small scale, it can often be difficult to get a line to represent all the edges within the space without changing the proportions or making it look too inky. But it is what it is at this point. And you'll notice how much I simplified that central window and particularly what's above it. And that's because I just was not going to be able to fit in the detail that I needed. And I'm going to have to simplify this anyway just to fit the drawing into a 10-minute time slot. However, one thing I can't afford to miss, even in a fairly brisk drawing, is that things that line up vertically need to line up vertically. So I do spend a little bit of time just making sure that happens. And you can see that I actually work out where the upper limit of the top section is before I draw the sides, because otherwise I won't know how far up to take the lines. I find this a more accurate way of doing it. And again, I need to align what I'm drawing now with what I've already drawn, whether it's these pilasters or whether it's the window. I'm certainly feeling the time pressure here a little bit. So I'm going to add the elements on top at this point, I've decided. This is a great subject to draw, and possibly even with a few more minutes to draw it. I did something at the end that I wasn't planning to do, so I hope you enjoy that. I did that in a few minutes of extra time, but I do all of the outline of this in the 10 minutes. So I am really pushing myself to keep to our time. Now, I do these figures in the front first. I think it's important in a scene like this to include, if you like, accessories to the main subject, such as these figures. In the reference, in the scene, their silhouette form and the dark shadows across the front and the shadows up the left-hand side are, I think, a very effective visual framing factor. So I don't want to lose that. Now, I'm not going to get overly caught up in detail with these figures because we're not looking at them really, we're looking at the palace first. But I need to put these figures in place before I can draw what goes behind them. So that's the important thing. And so now I get this wall into place. I get the corner and now the decorative setbacks with this arch at the top, and then picking up the architectural ornamentation of the tower. Again, I need to resist the urge to go into too much detail here, even if in some ways it's a bit simpler to do that, because I need to have the drawing look consistent the whole way across. And if I do more detail in one part, particularly if it's not the part that's perhaps visually most prominent and geographically closest to us, it can cause, I think, some sort of visual uncertainty in our whole scene. Now, it is important to work at getting these angles correct, these perspective angles, and to make sure that in this case, as we move down towards eye level, that the angle flattens into a more horizontal line. The actual horizontal line is pretty much at the eye level of the people that we see because the ground was quite flat. Now there is an awning coming off the front of the building on the side that faces the palace, so I put that in. Now there is quite a lot of detail that we can discern through the figures, but I really need to resist the urge to try and do too much, because it will look cluttered and actually make it harder to see what's happening if we draw more. So I need to work out what are the key elements, the key lines. There is one of these columns with the I don't know what sort of dome you call that, pointed dome on top, that in Paris were used to put posters on, I think, traditionally. So because it's such a Parisian object, I want to have that visually discernible. And now I have the slightly more complex decorations on the left-hand side, and I'm just looking at this thinking, wow, that lamp looks like it's really sloping, and I'm just wondering whether it's sloping in the drawing or whether in fact my camera wasn't quite angled horizontally, because I have noticed that if the camera is a little bit twisted towards the opposite end to where it's being held, which is the right hand side, sometimes there is a distortion happening there. I will have a look at the drawing after I finish this, but for now I'm just trying to suggest the detail behind the figures. Often it's good in a place such as this to not actually bring the line of the further back thing right up hard against a line of something in front, but to leave even a 0.5 millimeter gap can just help provide what I think of as visual breathing space between the different objects, and to help give separation, to help us appreciate what we're looking at. And there's a window, and there's a bit of decorative moulding here. You can see it's a pretty rough interpretation of what's actually there, but again, we're trying to create the effect of that architectural structure there, not actually copy it exactly. Another balustrade, and now we have a bit more of the same architecture that we had before. Now I got a little bit mixed up here in terms of I hadn't yet noticed that the right hand side of this tower now needs to come down past that wall where the lamppost is. So I just am having to massage all of my vertical lines on this upper right hand side across a little bit more to get enough width. But again, I don't think there's a problem with how it looks. I don't think it's particularly obvious that it wasn't quite drawn in the right place at the start. And there's not much on this. With these curves going up the towers, it's important to remember the perspective principle that the higher these curved lines go, the rounder they become. The more we start to see the circle that we would see if we looked straight up from underneath. And as they come down to eye level, they flatten and become a straight line across the column or the round tower at eye level. And if you're finding this interesting, why not hit the like button right now? If this is helping you, that helps me. But you are watching this at real time, and so I am moving quite briskly. I do have the advantage that I have drawn this both in life when I was sitting there having a coffee, and also twice, I think, as a drawing for demos of certain places. So I am at least familiar in lots of ways with this. So there's some decorative elements on top. I actually didn't quite realize that these were statues. I thought they were urns of some sort that go around the top. So I didn't particularly capture a good silhouette look for a statue. Instead, more of an upside down triangular urn with a handle on top or something. So now I need to get this. There's some, again, very typically Parisian street signs that have 1, 2 or 3 indicators going off quite close together. And right as my 10 minutes is just about up, I'm trying to give a hint of what we're seeing. Now you'll notice I simplified the building that's behind the scaffold and the cover-ins because, well, it wasn't going to help the drawing to leave it in, so I might as well use some artistic license and improve what I'm doing. So we're pretty much finished here. Now, I clearly don't have time with 10 minutes to do the sort of hatching that would be required to introduce the values. So what I did instead was, in extra time, and you're now watching this at double time, no longer real time, I grabbed an N3 and an N5 Copic sketch marker pen. That's N for neutral grey, that's the colour, or the colour that I use. And just using the 2 values, I decided that I would use that for the shade on the castle, and then I would use the N5 for the shadows that are being cast on the ground, and also the shade that's on the back of the pedestrians. In fact, no, I think it's not shade, it is shadow. It's shadow that's coming from the building on the right that we can't see. Now, shadow is darker than shade. That's a really important thing to realise, and it's quite fun to actually see it in real life. It's also slightly cooler. It has cool undertones rather than warmer undertones if you're doing these in colour at all. So what do you think? I'd love to hear in the comments whether you feel that the marker to introduce the value is helpful, or whether it ends up confusing things and you prefer it as a straight out line drawing. But it's certainly a quick way to have an impact. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope you found this helpful. This photo, of course, will be on my channel community page if you want to have a go. And I suggest you watch my video and then have a look at the reference and have a go drawing it yourself from the reference and learning to do the creative thinking as you go. But look, whatever you draw, however you draw it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.